The Sunday dinner had started normally enough. My two children, Maya and James, sat beside me at the long mahogany table in my parents' house, the same table where 3 generations had gathered for decades. The extended family filled the dining room as usual. 14 people crowded around the table with its white linen tablecloth and formal place settings. Aunts and uncles occupied the chairs closest to my parents, cousins scattered throughout in order of age and perceived importance. My sister Jessica sat directly across from me, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass, a habit she'd developed whenever she felt superior about something. The crystal chandelier overhead cast warm light across the scene, illuminating the expensive china that Mother insisted on using even for family dinners. Everything had to project success, even when that success was built on secrets and carefully maintained appearances. Maya, my 7-year-old, had dropped her fork while reaching for her water glass. It clattered against the porcelain plate, the sound sharp during a momentary lull in conversation. A small accident, barely noticeable over the usual dinner chatter. But Mother's head snapped toward us like a predator who had just located prey, her eyes narrowing with that familiar expression of disapproval I'd come to know so well. "Can't you control them?" she asked, her voice cutting through the dinner chatter. I picked up the fork and handed it back to Maya. "It was an accident." "Everything with your children is an accident," Jessica added, rolling her eyes. "Last week they were running in the hallway. The week before, laughing too loudly during Mother's book club." Uncle Thomas chuckled from the end of the table. "Kids will be kids, but there are limits." My father remained silent, focused intently on cutting his roast beef. I noticed his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. "I've been patient," Mother continued, setting down her silverware with deliberate precision. "But my generosity has limits. You've been living here for 3 years now. Rent-free." The word hung in the air. Several relatives exchanged glances. "I think it's time we discussed your contribution to this household," she said. $2,000 a month seems reasonable. Or perhaps you'd prefer to find your own place." Aunt Patricia nodded approvingly. "Very fair, Margaret. Very fair indeed." Jessica smiled. "Maybe it'll teach responsibility. Some of us didn't need to move back home in our 30s. I took a slow breath, watching my children. James, only 5, had stopped eating entirely. He looked up at me with worried eyes. Maya's small hand found mine under the table. "The children are too noisy anyway," Mother added. "They destroy my peace. Pay up or get out." Around the table, heads nodded. Uncle Thomas, Aunt Patricia, Jessica. Even Cousin David, who rarely spoke. A united front of family agreement that I had overstayed my welcome, that I was a burden, that my children were a nuisance. My father's knuckles were white around his knife and fork. Still he said nothing. I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. The relatives continued murmuring, already discussing how much rent I should pay, whether $2,000 was enough, whether I could even afford it. "Interesting time to reveal who pays your mortgage," I said quietly. The conversation stopped. Mother's confident smile flickered, then faded entirely. "What did you say?" she asked. My father's voice was barely a whisper. "Don't." But I was done being quiet. Done being treated like a charity case in front of my children. Done watching them learn that family meant humiliation and conditional love. I turned my phone screen toward Mother. I said, "Interesting time to discuss rent, considering I've been paying your mortgage for the last 4 years." The silence was absolute. Jessica leaned forward. "That's ridiculous. Why would you?" "Because Dad asked me to," I interrupted, looking at my father. His face had gone pale and he had set down his silverware with shaking hands. 4 years ago in October, when the business failed. When the commercial clients all pulled out within the same month. When you remortgaged the house to cover outstanding debts and payroll, trying to keep everyone employed until the end. When you were 3 months from foreclosure and the bank was sending final notices. I could still remember that phone call. Dad's voice breaking as he explained the situation. How everything he'd built over 30 years had collapsed in less than 6 months. How Mother didn't know the full extent of the financial devastation. How he needed help but couldn't bear to ask anyone else in the family. Mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, nearly knocking it over. We never what? Never told anyone. I scrolled through my banking history. $12,400 every single month for 48 months. That's $595,200 I've paid to keep this roof over your heads. Aunt Patricia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. You're lying, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. I stood, walked around the table and placed my phone in front of Mother. Transaction after transaction, all labeled the same way. Property payment, 123 Birchwood Lane. Her address. Uncle Thomas cleared his throat. Margaret, is this true? Mother couldn't seem to form words. She stared at the screen, her fingers scrolling slowly through the endless list of payments. We were going to tell everyone, my father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Once we got back on our feet. Once the business recovered. It's been 4 years, I said. The business didn't recover. You sold it 2 years ago. I know because you called me crying about it, Dad. And I told you not to worry about the house payments, that I had it handled. Jessica's face had lost all its smugness, replaced by dawning horror as she processed the implications. But how could you afford? You said you were struggling. You said that's why you moved back home. You let me believe you needed help, that you were barely making ends meet. I moved back because Dad asked me to, I explained, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. 3 years ago, right after Mom's surgery. The complications. The extended recovery period. He thought she needed family around during those difficult months. Thought the kids would cheer her up, give her something positive to focus on while she healed. I had a perfectly good apartment across town. 2 bedrooms close to the kids' school, a neighborhood where they had friends. We were happy there. The memory of that apartment felt distant now, like a life I'd lived in another world. A place where my children could be loud and messy and joyful without constantly being reminded they were inconvenient. I returned to my seat and put an arm around James, who had started crying quietly. Maya squeezed my hand tighter. I gave up my apartment, moved my children into a house where they'd be criticized for every sound they made, every moment of childhood joy. Because family needed me. Mother finally found her voice. We didn't know you were. We thought your father's consulting work was covering the mortgage. My consulting work covers groceries, Dad admitted quietly. Barely. The mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance. That's all her. Has been for years. Cousin David pushed back from the table. I need some air. Sit down, Aunt Patricia snapped at him, then turned to me. Why didn't you say something? Why let us think you were freeloading? Because Dad asked me not to, I said simply. Because he was embarrassed that the family business his father started 60 years ago had collapsed on his watch. Because he didn't want people to know how badly things had failed, how close you all came to losing this house. This symbol of family success and stability. Because he thought family is supposed to help each other quietly, without making a production of it, without demanding recognition or gratitude. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd kept quiet to protect his pride, and in doing so, had allowed my children and myself to become targets for the family's judgment and criticism. I looked around the table at each face, taking in their expressions. The smugness had evaporated completely, replaced by various combinations of shock, shame, embarrassment, and in some cases, a dawning anger at being kept in the dark about something so significant. Uncle Thomas looked betrayed. Aunt Patricia seemed unable to process the information. Cousin David had his head in his hands. But I'm done being quiet when my children are insulted in the house I pay for, I continued. Done being treated like a burden when I'm the only reason there's still a family home to gather in. Jessica's wine glass sat forgotten. All those times I commented about you not contributing. Mother, did you know? I thought. Mother's voice was shaky now. I thought we were managing. Your father said he had it under control. He did have it under control, I said, meeting my father's eyes across the table. Because he asked me for help and I gave it. No questions asked, no conditions attached, no demands for gratitude or recognition. Just help, quiet and consistent, because that's what I believed family does. That's what I was raised to believe family means. My father's eyes were wet now, tears he was too proud to let fall in front of everyone. Uncle Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is quite a revelation, Margaret. Edward, I think perhaps we should give you some privacy to sort this out. No, Mother said sharply, her voice cracking slightly. Everyone stays. They all heard me humiliate my daughter at this table. They all nodded along when I demanded she pay rent or leave. They can all sit here and hear the truth about who's really been supporting this family. She turned to me, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw actual emotion in her eyes. Not the cold disappointment I'd grown accustomed to, but something rawer. Him perhaps. Or regret. I didn't know, she said. I swear I didn't know. Would it have mattered? I asked. If you'd known I was paying the mortgage, would you have treated my children differently? Treated me differently? She couldn't answer. My father cleared his throat. I should have told her. Told everyone. But I was ashamed. The business my father built. The one I ran into the ground. The house almost lost. Having to ask my daughter to save us. I couldn't face it. So instead you let me face it, I said. Let me and my kids be the family charity case while I quietly kept everyone housed. Aunt Patricia set down her napkin. Margaret, I think I owe your daughter an apology. We all do. An apology doesn't change the bank account, Jessica muttered, then caught herself. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My phone buzzed. A text message from my bank. The monthly automatic payment had processed. $12,400 withdrawn right on schedule. I showed the notification to Mother. That's this month's mortgage. Due on the 15th, paid on the 10th, just like always. Just like the last 48 months. She closed her eyes. I'm so sorry. Are you? I asked. Sorry I paid the mortgage, or sorry everyone found out? Both, she admitted. And sorry that I made you feel unwelcome in a house you're keeping from foreclosure. Sorry I criticized your beautiful children who did nothing wrong except be children. Sorry I've been so blind. James tugged at my sleeve. Can we go now, Mom? I looked at my son's tear-stained face, at Maya's confused expression, at the table full of relatives who suddenly saw me very differently. Yes, sweetheart, I said. We can go. I stood and helped my children from their chairs. Around the table no one moved to stop us. Wait, my father said. Please. Let's talk about this. We can talk, I agreed. Tomorrow. When the kids aren't here to watch their family implode. Mother reached out as I passed her chair. Her hand caught mine. I was cruel. Unforgivably cruel. Please don't take the children away. You demanded I pay rent or leave, I reminded her gently. So I'm leaving. I'll keep paying the mortgage because I promised Dad I would, and I keep my promises. But my children and I will find somewhere they can laugh without criticism. Somewhere they can drop a fork without judgment. Jessica stood. I'll help you pack. It's the least I can do. No need, I said. I've been looking at apartments for 2 months now. Since the last time Maya was scolded for singing. I have a place lined up. We can move in next weekend. Uncle Thomas spoke up. If you need help moving, I have a truck. Thank you, I said. I'll let you know. I guided my children toward the door. Behind us, the dinner table sat in shambles. Food growing cold, wine untouched. A family confronting truths they'd successfully ignored for years. At the doorway I paused and turned back. For what it's worth, I never wanted recognition. Never wanted gratitude. I just wanted my children to feel welcome in their grandparents' home. That's all I ever wanted. Mother was crying now, quietly, her perfect composure finally cracked. We left them there, my children and I, walking out to my car in the cooling evening air. Maya climbed into her booster seat, James into his. I buckled them both in and kissed their foreheads. Are we in trouble? James asked. No, baby, I assured him. We're not in trouble. We're going to be just fine. And for the first time in 3 years I believed it. My phone rang before I could start the car. My father's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mother's number, also voicemail. Then Jessica's. I silenced the phone and drove home through the quiet streets, my children already beginning to relax in the back seat, their earlier tension fading. The mortgage payment would clear tomorrow. The family home would remain secure for another month. And my children would learn that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you, even when those people are family. Especially when those people are family. Because real family doesn't demand rent from the person keeping them housed. Real family doesn't criticize children for being children. Real family doesn't mistake silence for weakness or humility for dependence. And my children deserve to learn what real family looked like, even if I had to build it myself, one boundary at a time.